Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's episode of Whether or Not. We are your co-hosts for this evening's show. I'm Nick Guzzo.
And I'm Joe Ruch.
Joe, we finally saw some much-needed rain here in central Pennsylvania this week.
Yep, abnormally dry conditions have been dominating central Pennsylvania, so this is a much-needed break from those dry conditions as precipitation was very welcomed for the region.
Yeah, Joe, I'm interested to see if Ryan has any more rain coming up in his forecast later on.
But before we get to that, time for some nature in the news. Today, I'll be talking about climate detectives out in full force uncovering a record low temperature in the northern hemisphere near the Greenland ice sheet. And also, as we head into October, what that means for hurricane season.
My first story talks about storms near Jupiter's south pole that produce unusual geometric patterns. And my second story talks about how the tropical region is expanding and warming. We also have a feature coming up from Salix, Iverson on Arctic sea ice extent.
And now, time for Nature in the News.
The tropics are heating up, and no, I am not talking about hurricanes. Typically, the tropics extend from the latitudes of 23 degrees north to 23 degrees south, but now the region has grown in size. Ocean gyres that are several hundred kilometers in size are causing the tropics to warm and expand. These ocean gyres are not new, but their increase in intensity is. Gyres bring together warm surface air masses in the tropics, and with their uptick in their intensity, the warming in the region has increased, which allows the tropics to expand. In the tropics, the central part of the region is humid and hosts a lot of precipitation, while the northern and southern outskirts of the region are dry and warm. Scientists have found that the outskirts of the tropics are now near the latitudes of 30 degrees north and 30 degrees south. This brings those warm and dry conditions that are on the outskirts to the southern United States. It is still unknown if the expansion of the tropics is what has led to more droughts in places like California and Australia, but scientists do know that droughts and hurricanes are more likely to occur with this expansion.
As September comes to an end, so does the peak of Atlantic hurricane season. However, as we transition into October, the southern tier of the United States is now at an elevated risk of hurricane formation. In October, tropical cyclone formation is mainly in the western Caribbean, Bay of Campeche, and southern Gulf of Mexico. Formation off the western coast of Africa is not as common. By this late in the season, upper-level westerly winds become stronger and cold fronts dip farther south towards the Gulf of Mexico. Cool air masses bring down the ocean surface water temperature as well. All these factors preclude many tropical cyclones from reaching far north into the United States. However, a handful of storms can still develop in the season's fifth month. A more southern track puts Florida and all the Gulf states at an elevated risk. Between 1900 and 2018, Florida was hit by 7 major hurricanes. 5 named storms developed last year, with only 2 impacting the southern U.S. Historically speaking, between 1900 and 2018, 80% of major hurricanes have formed by this point of the season. With that being said, do not let your guard down and stay up to date on the latest tropical news.
Good evening, everyone. I'm student meteorologist Ryan DePhillips with the Central PA forecast. This past week has been a battleground of temperatures as Mother Nature cannot seem to make up her mind. It went from 82 degrees in State College last Friday to 50 to 60 degree readings with much needed rain earlier in the week. However, you can expect a slight rebound in temperatures, but not before some cool fall air does arrive. But first, let's take a look at the bigger picture. A weak coastal low will run its way northeastward and provide more sunshine on the day on Friday and Saturday to start off your weekend. But don't let that sunshine fool you, as temperatures will be a little bit below average. More on that later. But as high pressure builds its way into the region and into New England, Sunshine will dominate for the most part. However, clouds will build up later in the day on Sunday, and to end the weekend, there could be a disturbance that might make its way early into next week. When and where it's going to impact, let's check the extended forecast. But first, let's go back to Friday's forecast, as the air mass will be seasonally cool for this time of year, with a high temperature of 59 degrees. More sun will develop later in the day to set the stage for some mostly clear skies overnight, and a low of 38 degrees. Now, it may not be quite frost weather, but as you head out and about to the higher elevations, the low to mid 30 temperature readings could provide some of that frost. But as we head into Saturday, temperatures will be on the rebound with a high of 58 degrees. It will definitely be my pick of the weekend. If you're going out and about in terms of apple picking, go on a hike, or go on an afternoon run like I usually do, it will be ideal to venture outside. On Sunday, more sunshine will be in the cards early, but as I mentioned, that next disturbance may make its way in effect State College and the Central PA area later on Sunday. But now for our very own Salix Iverson, will be taking over with a feature about the 2020 Arctic sea ice minimum.
Satellite data by NASA and the National Snow and Ice Data Center at the University of Colorado Boulder shows that the 2020 minimum Arctic sea ice extent likely occurred on September 15th. Satellites are useful to scientists for tracking the extent of Arctic sea ice. I sat down with Dr. Andrew Carlton, professor of physical geography in the Department of Geography at Penn State, to discuss satellites used in the Arctic and this year's minimum Arctic sea ice extent. The most useful type of satellite imagery for viewing the Arctic and Antarctic is passive microwave radiation.
Microwave radiation can be sensed at night and also through clouds that are not very thick. So this meant for the first time that in the polar regions we could have sort of 24/7, if you like, coverage, or at least it wouldn't be affected by the winter polar night. We would have coverage of the polar regions in terms of the sea ice condition.
Satellites have been monitoring the extent of Arctic sea ice since the 1980s. Scientists have found that since then, Arctic sea ice extent in the summer and the winter has been on a steady decline.
As both the air and the ocean warm up, it just makes it more difficult in consecutive years or in consecutive fall and winter seasons after the summer for sea ice to form. And when it does form, it tends to be thinner. We've noticed a thinning in the sea ice over time, as well as a decrease in the area.
The ice albedo feedback loop can help explain why the September 2020 Arctic extent of 1.44 million square miles is believed to be the second lowest minimum sea ice extent.
The reason that we have this downward trend is primarily because of that ice albedo feedback. And so as you get less and less sea ice forming in the wintertime, this means that, of course, there's going to be less in the subsequent summer. And this means that the darker ocean is exposed to solar radiation, or a larger area of the ocean is exposed. The Arctic Ocean is exposed to the solar radiation. That means there's more absorption of the solar radiation that continues to heat up the ocean, as well as the air temperatures.
Scientists believe that with this downward trend, we may have summers with no sea ice at all in the near future.
Once it starts, it's very difficult to reverse it. And so a lot of models are predicting by about 2035, we will start having summers with no sea ice in the Arctic basin at all.
In addition to iceless summers and a general warming in the Arctic, there are a multitude of dire consequences of climate change in the Arctic region.
There's a number of consequences. As I said, increased temperatures, more wildfires in higher latitudes, vegetational change, the melting of the permafrost. And permafrost melting has a couple of main consequences. One is that essentially buried methane is released into the atmosphere, and methane is a potent greenhouse gas, of course. The other thing is that the melting permafrost destabilizes the ground surface. It means that structures that you build are going to become unstable, and roadways, buildings, and so on. So you can have lots of problems that way. And as I also mentioned, sea level rise. So there's a number of problems that come from the accelerated warming in the Arctic region.
As global temperatures remain on the rise, we can continue to use satellites to keep an eye on the Arctic. For Weather or Not, I'm Salix Iverson.
Welcome back, everyone. It's student meteorologist Ryan DePhillips again with the extended forecast. But first, I want to recap what this weekend will hold, as for the most part, it will be a beautiful one at that, and a great start on Friday. Conditions this Saturday will especially be beautiful, but on the cooler side, so again, if you're heading out and about, I highly recommend wearing a light jacket, as temperatures will be mostly in the 50s for most of the afternoon. While I know some of you will be watching football on Sunday, head outdoors early though, because our next storm system will approach us later Sunday night and then into Monday. And for that next chance of rain on Monday, I want to stress that there's a high uncertainty amongst the weather models, but nonetheless, I'm calling for some occasional rain showers with temperatures stuck in the mid-50s, some 10 degrees below average this time of year. But the big story will be the rebound in temperatures, as Tuesday's high may creep back to normal, and then Wednesday's high may surpass that with some sunshine. But another quick shot of rain showers will usher in cooler air for Thursday and Friday, as temperatures may fall back below average for this time of the year, and then perhaps another nice weekend in the books. Now, back to you, Joe and Nick.
And now back to our weather whiz quiz question. What was the lowest temperature ever recorded on Earth in degrees Celsius? A, negative 73.7, B, negative 80, C, negative 89.2, or D, negative 100.5?
And the correct answer is C, negative 89.2 degrees Celsius, which occurred in the southern hemisphere in Antarctica.
Joe, that's really cold. You would need a lot more than just a jacket to stay warm in those conditions. And that is all the time we have for tonight's show. We are your co-hosts. I'm Nick Guzzo.
And I'm Joe Ruch.
We hope you have a great evening, everyone.